I found out my husband has been secretly supporting his ex-wife's new husband financially, and now he's telling me I should be grateful that he's helping them stay afloat. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave I hadn't seen coming. It all started when I stumbled across a bank statement I didn't recognize, buried in a stack of mail on the kitchen counter. I thought it was a mistake at first, maybe a random charge we'd forgotten about. But as I scanned through the transactions, my heart sank. There were regular, significant payments, amounts I knew we'd never discussed, going out monthly to an unfamiliar account. After an evening of piecing it together, I finally asked James, 43M, my husband, about the charges. I expected confusion, maybe concern, but instead he sighed, as if I'd just confronted him with something minor. Those payments are to help Mara, he said, mentioning his ex-wife without a trace of guilt. She and her husband are going through a tough time. I stared at him, disbelief and anger tightening in my chest. You're sending money to Mara's husband? Without telling me. He shrugged, his tone unnervingly calm. Mara and I were together for years, Lily, 39F. I feel responsible for her, in a way. Her husband lost his job recently, and they're struggling to make ends meet. I'm just helping them out until they're back on their feet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. James, we're married now. You don't get to make financial decisions that impact us both without talking to me first. And certainly not when it's this big. He waved a hand, dismissing my concern. It's not like it's hurting us. We're comfortable. And it's a temporary thing. My frustration bubbled over. It's not about the money, James. It's the secrecy. The fact that you've been hiding this from me, and that you feel you owe her and her husband anything. They're not your responsibility. His expression hardened, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. Lily, I didn't hide it from you. I just didn't think you needed to know every detail. And frankly, I thought you'd be more understanding. Understanding? I repeated, incredulous. James, you're financially supporting your ex-wife and her husband without even thinking to consult me. How am I supposed to be okay with this? He crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. Lily, sometimes life isn't as simple as cutting people out when you're done with them. Mara was a huge part of my life. I may not be with her anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore her when she needs help. There was a conviction in his tone that both infuriated and confused me. It was like he'd made this decision based on some personal code I couldn't access, one that didn't include me in the equation. And for a moment, I couldn't tell if he was trying to manipulate me or if he truly believed that I should just accept it. James, I said slowly, taking a deep breath to calm myself. I need you to understand how this makes me feel. You're choosing to help someone from your past without even thinking of the impact it might have on your current life. With me. That's not fair. He looked away, and for the first time, I saw a glint of irritation in his eyes. Lily, I didn't expect this to be such a big deal. It's not like I'm giving her a fortune. You should be grateful I'm doing something good here. Grateful? I repeated, my voice rising. I should be grateful that you're hiding major decisions from me. Grateful that you're prioritizing your ex-wife's needs over our marriage. He threw his hands up in exasperation. I can't believe this is turning into an argument. All I'm trying to do is help someone who was there for me at one point. This doesn't change anything between us, Lily. It's just temporary support. But his words didn't sit right. Temporary support. I couldn't shake the feeling that this went deeper than he was letting on. If he truly believed he could keep such a big secret from me and then justify it with a simple "be grateful," I had to wonder what else he might feel entitled to hide. That night, I slept in the guest room, replaying the conversation over and over. His dismissiveness, the way he brushed off my concerns with such confidence, gnawed at me. I thought about our relationship, the trust we'd built, or at least the trust I'd thought we had. This wasn't just about the money. It was about boundaries, priorities, and respect. The next morning, James barely looked at me as he poured his coffee, as though I'd wronged him by not accepting his decision. I wasn't about to let it slide, though. Not without understanding why he thought this was okay. James, we need to talk about this again, I said, my tone firm. He sighed, setting his mug down. I thought we already talked about this. No, I replied, unyielding. You brushed it off. I want to know why you think it's okay to make these decisions alone. This isn't a small oversight, James. You're choosing to support another household without involving me in the choice. He took a long sip of this coffee, his eyes focused on the floor. Look, I get that you're upset, but I have a history with Mara. There was a time when I felt like I owed her a debt in a way. She was there for me when I had nothing. I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now without her. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. James, I understand that. But we're married. You don't get to keep debts to people in your past at the expense of our relationship. He rubbed his temples, looking weary. I don't think you understand how complicated it is, Lily. There's no simple way to explain this. Try me? I challenged, feeling the weight of his secret settle like a stone in my chest. After a tense silence, he finally spoke. I thought Mara would be able to manage on her own, but things fell apart for her when her husband lost his job. She didn't come to me directly, but I felt responsible. I wanted to help without making a big deal out of it. And that's why you didn't tell me, because you thought I'd make a big deal out of you giving your ex-wife and her husband a private financial safety net. He sighed again, seeming to struggle for words. I didn't want you to think I was doing it for any reason other than compassion. A spark of bitterness flared in my chest. James, if it was just about compassion, you would have told me. If there was nothing to hide, this wouldn't be an issue. You need to understand how wrong it feels that you didn't even think to talk to me first. He looked down, the first hint of genuine regret crossing his face. Maybe I didn't handle this the right way. But Lily, you have to understand. I couldn't ignore her. Why not? I pressed, desperate to understand why he felt so obligated to Mara, why he put her needs above the transparency in our marriage. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor again. Because a part of me feels like I owe her. Even though we ended things years ago, I feel this obligation to make sure she's okay. There it was, a confession I hadn't expected. He still felt tied to her, emotionally, even if he wouldn't admit it outright. It hurt more than I cared to show, a deep ache that made me question where I really stood in his life. James, that's not fair to me, I said quietly, barely holding back the pain in my voice. It's not fair for me to be left in the dark while you support someone who's no longer part of your life. If you're choosing to take care of her over being honest with me, then where does that leave us? He looked up, his expression finally softening. I don't want this to hurt us, Lily. I never meant for it to become this complicated. I thought it was the right thing to do. I took a long, steadying breath, realizing that the only way forward was to be crystal clear. If we're going to make this work, there can't be any more secrets, James. No more decisions like this without me. If you're truly committed to our life together, then your obligations to her end here. It's either us, or it's this idea that you owe her something. But it can't be both. He swallowed, nodding slowly as the gravity of my words sank in. You're right. I understand. But as he looked away, I couldn't shake the lingering doubt. The days that followed felt like a delicate balancing act. James had agreed to stop the financial support, but the way he'd done it, his reluctance, the lingering sense of obligation, left a wedge between us. I couldn't escape the feeling that a part of him was still tied to Mara, even if he wouldn't admit it openly. And while he'd said he would put an end to it, I hadn't seen him make any real effort to follow through. One evening, after dinner, I decided to ask him if he'd actually stopped the payments. The question weighed heavily on my mind, and I wanted reassurance that he'd taken action. Have you canceled the transfer yet? I asked gently, doing my best to keep my tone neutral. He looked up from his plate, his expression shifting uncomfortably. I haven't had a chance yet. It's been a busy week, and things are still tight for Mara and her husband. They're still in a rough spot. I tried to keep my frustration in check. James, we talked about this. You agreed that we'd move forward, just the two of us. Why is this still ongoing? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I understand, Lily. I know it's a lot, but I've been doing it for months now, and it doesn't feel right to pull the plug so suddenly. They need a bit of time to adjust. I was just trying to avoid causing unnecessary hardship. I felt my patience slipping, anger simmering under the surface. James, this isn't about hardship for them. It's about respect in our marriage. You keep putting their needs over ours. He looked genuinely pained, as though he were caught in a dilemma only he could see. I get it, but I can't just leave them stranded, Lily. Mara was there for me during a hard time. This feels like my responsibility. And what about your responsibility to us? I asked, my voice soft but firm. When is it going to be our turn to come first? His face fell, and he took a deep breath, finally nodding. You're right. I'll make the call to cancel it. I promise. But that night, even after he'd given me his word, I couldn't shake the feeling of distrust that had settled between us. I found myself lying awake, replaying his words over and over, wondering how much of them I could truly believe. It was as if we were standing on opposite sides of a line I hadn't drawn but couldn't erase either. His sense of loyalty to Mara, this need to take care of her and her husband, felt like an unspoken bond that kept pulling him back, and I didn't know how to compete with that. The next morning, I decided to look at the bank accounts for myself. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know if he followed through. I logged in, scrolling through the transactions with a heavy heart, and there it was. The latest transfer had gone through just days before, with no sign of any cancellation. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. He'd lied to me. Despite everything, despite all his promises, he continued to support them, as though my feelings were nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. When James came home that evening, I confronted him directly. I checked the bank account today, I said, my voice calm but cold. The payments are still going through. The color drained from his face as he realized he'd been caught. Lily, I was going to cancel it, I swear. I just needed a bit more time to get everything in order. I didn't mean to lie to you. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words press down on me. James, it's not about needing more time. You're choosing to keep them afloat, to prioritize their needs over the promises you made to me. Do you even understand how that feels? He took a step back, guilt flashing in his eyes. I'm sorry, Lily. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't mean for it to come to this. Then why are you still doing it? I demanded, my voice rising. You keep saying you're going to stop, but every time I look, you're still sending them money. I can't keep living like this, wondering where your loyalty truly lies. For the first time, he seemed to really hear me. He sat down, covering his face with his hands as he took a deep breath. I've been doing this for so long, I didn't even realize how much it was affecting us. Mira's situation became this constant obligation I felt I couldn't escape. I kept thinking I could help her without it impacting us, but I see now that I was wrong. Then you need to show me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You need to put us first, without making excuses. After a long silence, he nodded. I'll end it. Right now, in front of you, so you know I'm serious. I followed him to the computer, watching as he logged into the account and canceled the payments. He sat back, exhaling as though a weight had been lifted, but I could see that he was shaken. The silence between us was heavy as we returned to the living room, both of us uncertain about what to say. In the days that followed, things felt tense but finally honest. We were both stepping carefully, trying to rebuild the trust that had been fractured. James was more transparent about the finances, even showing me account details unprompted, as if to prove he was committed to repairing the damage. And I could tell he was genuinely trying, even though I sensed that the decision had left him with lingering guilt. But despite the progress, a part of me couldn't forget what had happened. It felt as though a barrier had formed between us, a reminder that he'd chosen to keep secrets, to protect someone else's needs at the expense of our marriage. Every time I thought of it, I feel a pang of hurt, a question lingering in the back of my mind. If he could keep this from me, what else was he willing to hide? One evening, as we were winding down, James looked over at me with an expression I hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine remorse. Lily, he said quietly, I know things aren't back to normal, and I know that's my fault. But I want to make it up to you. I want to show you that I'm committed to us, and only us. His words softened something in me, though I wasn't ready to fully let my guard down. It's going to take time, James. Trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight. He nodded, taking my hand in his. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't want you to feel like you're second to anyone. The sincerity in his voice reassured me, but I still needed more than promises. I needed him to show me, through his actions, that he was truly ready to prioritize our marriage, to rebuild what had been broken. Over the next few weeks, he kept his word, taking active steps to strengthen our relationship. He was more present, more open, and slowly, I started to feel the tension ease. We spent more time together, making an effort to reconnect and talk openly about our future. And gradually, the hurt and distrust began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope that we could move forward. One night, as we sat on the couch, wrapped in comfortable silence, I realized that we'd come through one of the hardest tests of our marriage. It hadn't been easy, and the scars were still there, but they were healing. And as I looked at James, I could see that he was willing to keep putting in the work to make things right. In that moment, I decided to let go of the lingering resentment. We both made mistakes, but we'd chosen to face them together, to rebuild on a foundation of honesty and commitment. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, knowing that we were finally moving forward, together. In the weeks that followed, James and I worked to rebuild a sense of normalcy, though it often felt like we were moving cautiously, as if testing the strength of new ground. Despite the progress we'd made, I couldn't fully shake the memories of his secrecy. Our conversations felt careful, both of us still holding onto a hint of tension, the residue of broken trust that hadn't quite healed. One evening, as we were planning a weekend trip together, James seemed quieter than usual. After a few awkward silences, he looked at me, worry etched in his face. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, Lily. I just want you to know that I'll never make you feel like you're not my priority again." His voice was sincere, and he reached for my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. I offered him a small smile, appreciating the reassurance but aware that words alone couldn't erase the doubt. "I believe you're trying, James. But it's still hard to forget everything. It takes time to really feel secure again." "I know," he nodded, his eyes downcast. "I just don't want you to think that I'm still holding on to anything from the past. I need you to know that I'm here, fully. For us." Despite the seriousness of his words, something felt unsaid, a hesitation lingering in the air between us. I tried to let it go, but that evening, as we sat watching a movie, I noticed him checking his phone more frequently than usual, his expression guarded whenever he glanced at the screen. When I asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off, saying it was work-related, but I couldn't help but feel an all too familiar pang of suspicion rise in me. The next morning, I woke up determined to finally address the underlying tension head-on. "James," I said as he was pouring his coffee, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Is there anything else, anything at all, that you're keeping from me? Because if we're going to move forward, we have to be completely open with each other." He looked startled, his gaze dropping to his coffee mug. "Lily, I've told you everything. I've cut off all financial support to Mara and her husband. I'm focused on us now." But as he spoke, his tone was tinged with a faint defensiveness that made my stomach churn. I pressed on, knowing I couldn't keep ignoring my intuition. "Then why does it still feel like there's something between us? Why do I feel like you're holding back?" He sighed, setting down his mug, and after a long pause, he finally spoke. "Mara reached out a few days ago," he admitted, almost reluctantly. "She didn't ask for money or anything like that, but she wanted to talk, to check in. I told her it wasn't a good idea, but I didn't want to bring it up with you and worry you over something that wasn't going to go anywhere." A familiar sense of disappointment settled over me. He'd hidden it again, this time under the guise of protecting me. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. "James, I understand that it's hard to cut ties completely. But when you keep things like this from me, even small things, it only makes the problem worse. I need to know that you're not letting her stay a part of our lives, even in little ways." He nodded, rubbing his forehead. "You're right. I just felt guilty, I guess. Like maybe I owed her an explanation. But I'll make it clear, once and for all, that I can't keep doing this." "Please do," I said softly. "For us." That afternoon, he promised he would tell Mara that he couldn't have any more contact with her, that he'd moved on, and that his focus was fully on his life with me. He even offered to show me the messages, but I told him it wasn't about reading texts or tracking his every move. It was about him choosing, consistently, to put our marriage first. A few days passed, and while things were still a little raw between us, I could tell he was trying to earn back my trust. He was more open, more transparent in little ways that reassured me he was committed to this new chapter. I even started to feel hopeful, thinking that maybe we'd finally turned a corner and can put the past behind us for good. Then, one evening while we were out for a quiet dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message request on social media. I opened it, my heart skipping a beat as I read the sender's name, Mara. The message was brief but unmistakably pointed. Lily, I think it's only fair you know that James and I have stayed in touch. He may have told you otherwise, but he feels obligated to help, and you can't change that. I sat there in shock, my stomach twisting as I processed her words. She was openly challenging me, implying that James was still more loyal to her than he'd let on. Anger and hurt swelled within me, and I had to fight to keep my composure as I looked up at James, who was scrolling through his own phone, oblivious. James, I said, my voice tight. I just got a message from Mara. He looked up, eyes wide. What? What did she say? I handed him my phone, watching as he read her message, his expression darkening with every word. This is just her stirring things up. She's trying to create problems where there aren't any. But is she? I asked, unable to keep the accusation out of my voice. James, I trusted you. I let go of my doubts because you promised me this was over. And now she's telling me that you're still in touch. He shook his head, his voice rising defensively. I told you, she reached out to me. I didn't respond. She's just trying to manipulate you, Lily. You can't let her get in your head. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Maybe that's true, but the fact that she thinks she can reach out to me like this, it makes me feel like there's something I don't know. Like she has a confidence about her place in your life that I don't understand. He closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. Lily, there's nothing between us. I haven't responded to her, and I don't want anything to do with her. I'll block her, I'll change my number if that's what it takes. I felt torn, his words full of promises I desperately wanted to believe. But Mara's message had shaken me, leaving me questioning everything I thought we'd rebuilt. James, I need you to really think about this. If you have any lingering loyalty, any sense of duty to her, you need to let it go completely. It's her or it's us. His face softened, and he reached for my hand across the table. Lily, I choose us. I will do whatever it takes to make this right. I'll put a stop to her games, once and for all. The days that followed were quiet but tense. James deleted his social media profiles and blocked Mara's number, taking steps to show that he was truly committed to moving forward. I appreciated his efforts, but a part of me remained cautious, still haunted by the memory of Mara's words. I tried to remind myself that actions speak louder than words, that his steps to cut her out were genuine proof of his commitment to us. Finally, one night as we were sitting together, I felt a wave of vulnerability come over me, and I turned to him, my voice soft. James, I know you've made mistakes, and so have I, but I need to feel like we're both fully invested in this marriage. I need to trust that we're both all in. He looked at me with a sincerity I hadn't seen in a long time. Lily, I'm all in. I know I messed up, but I promise you from here on out, it's just us. In the months that followed, James kept his word. He was open, present, and completely focused on nurturing our relationship. Slowly, our home became a place of warmth and stability again, a safe space free of secrets and lingering doubts. I could feel the trust between us rebuilding, like a bridge that had been carefully repaired, stronger than before. It hadn't been an easy road, but as we moved forward, I felt a growing certainty that we were finally on solid ground. And while the scars of the past would always be there, we'd chosen to face them together, committed to building a future that belonged to us alone. As the months went on, the cautious peace we found began to feel more natural, a steady rhythm replacing the tension that had once clouded our lives. James was following through on his promises, and I could see he was truly trying. He became more intentional with our time together, putting effort into little things. Cooking dinner, planning weekends, sharing his thoughts openly. For the first time in a long time, I felt like he was fully present, and I wanted to believe that this commitment would last. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, James looked up from his plate, a nervous energy in his expression. I've been thinking about everything, Lily, he said, pausing as though gathering his words. I know I've hurt you, and I know it's going to take time to regain your trust. I want to make things right, not just by moving forward, but by understanding what I put you through. I set down my fork, intrigued and touched by the vulnerability in his voice. I appreciate that, James. It means a lot to me that you're trying to understand. He nodded, his eyes earnest. I don't want to just go through the motions. I've been talking to a therapist, trying to understand why I felt so obligated to Mara in a way that nearly cost us our marriage. Surprise washed over me, and I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a while. You didn't mention that. I wasn't sure if I should, but I thought it might be a way to address things that I clearly couldn't handle on my own, he admitted. It's been eye-opening. I think part of me clung to that old relationship as a way to feel needed. I had convinced myself that supporting Mara was somehow virtuous, even when it was hurting you. Hearing him acknowledge it so openly, with such self-awareness, was more healing than I could have anticipated. For the first time, I felt a weight lift, as though we were really beginning to understand each other. We began sharing our thoughts more openly, talking through issues we hadn't been brave enough to confront before. He admitted that the loyalty he felt for Mara stemmed from unresolved guilt, a sense that he'd left her behind too quickly after their divorce. And I, in turn, admitted that I'd always felt a shadow of comparison in our relationship, a nagging worry that I wasn't fully enough for him. It was uncomfortable to discuss, but we were finally opening up the places that had once been hidden, and with every conversation, I felt us drawing closer. One night, as we were watching a movie on the couch, James turned to me, his expression serious. I realize now that I've been asking too much of you, Lily. I've been relying on your forgiveness without giving you enough reason to trust me again. I want to be the kind of partner you deserve, one who puts you first. The sincerity in his voice filled me with a bittersweet hope. I could feel his regret, his genuine desire to rebuild our foundation. Thank you, James, I replied softly. I think we're both learning what it means to really be there for each other. As the days turned into weeks, our relationship felt more balanced, rooted in an honesty that hadn't been there before. We each had our own commitments. James continued his therapy sessions, and I poured myself into hobbies I'd set aside, rediscovering things that brought me joy outside of our relationship. Our marriage wasn't the only part of my life that needed healing. I realized I had my own dreams and goals that I'd lost sight of. As we grew closer, I also felt a growing sense of independence, a healthy balance I hadn't felt in years. One Saturday morning, as we were enjoying coffee on the porch, James surprised me with a question. How would you feel about going on a trip together? He asked, a gentle excitement in his eyes. A trip? I echoed, smiling. Where to? I don't know, somewhere new. Maybe Europe. We could explore, get away from all of this for a bit. Just us. He hesitated, then added, I want to make new memories, Lily. Ones that remind us of why we're here together. The idea filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected. A trip would give us a chance to reconnect, to focus on each other without the distractions of daily life. I'd love that, I said, feeling a spark of excitement. It sounds perfect. Over the next few weeks, we planned our getaway, choosing Italy as our destination. We mapped out an itinerary that would take us through small towns and historic cities, eager to immerse ourselves in the culture and escape our routine. The trip felt like a promise, a commitment to our future, free from the complications of the past. When we finally arrived in Italy, the magic of the place seemed to cast a spell over us. We wandered through cobblestone streets, explored ancient ruins, and shared long, lingering dinners under the stars. With every experience, every quiet moment, I felt us letting go of the lingering hurts, choosing instead to fill our lives with new memories, ones that were just for us. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a quiet hilltop, James took my hand, his gaze thoughtful. Lily, I know we still have a lot to work on, but being here with you, it reminds me of why I fell in love with you in the first place. I want us to keep building this life together, to keep choosing each other every day. Hearing those words, surrounded by such beauty, I felt a profound peace settle over me. I want that too, James, I replied, my heart full. I think we're finally on the right path. The trip brought us closer than we'd been in years. We returned home feeling rejuvenated, our relationship more solid and real than ever. The memories we'd made in Italy became a touchstone, a reminder of the love we fought so hard to protect and rebuild. Back home, the peacefulness of our life together continued. James was more present, more connected, and I felt a new sense of security. He no longer seemed weighed down by unresolved guilt or obligations from the past, and I no longer felt haunted by the lingering shadows of Mara. We'd finally come to a place of mutual respect and trust, and it showed in everything we did. Then, one day, as we were preparing for a quiet evening in, James handed me a small envelope with a sheepish smile. "Open it," he said, his eyes warm with affection. Curious, I opened the envelope and found a handwritten note inside, a promise he'd written just for me. "Lily, I promise to always choose you, to put our love above all else. You're my partner, my best friend, my everything. This life we're building, it's ours, and it always will be." The simplicity of the note, the sincerity behind it, touched me deeply. In that moment, I realized that we had finally reached a place of healing, a place where we could both fully embrace the future, free from the weight of the past. And as I looked up at James, my heart full of love and gratitude, I knew that this time we were truly ready to move forward together. The months following our return from Italy felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one that was truly ours. With each passing day, I noticed how our home felt lighter, our conversations more open and natural. We'd worked through the difficult parts, and now we were finally living in a peace that we both fought so hard to create. James kept his promise to be fully present, and I felt a profound sense of reassurance in the way he showed up for us. He'd made changes, not just in words but in actions. He planned surprise dates, actively supported my new interests, and made it a point to talk openly about any lingering feelings or challenges we faced. For the first time in years, I felt the security of a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. One evening, as we were preparing dinner together, James turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Lily, I've been thinking about everything we've been through," he said, his voice warm, "and I realized that I want to do something to celebrate the life we built together, something big." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Something big, huh? What do you have in mind?" He smiled, taking my hands in his. "I know it's a bit spontaneous, but what would you think about renewing our vows?" His words caught me off guard, and a wave of warmth flooded over me. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, a depth of love that made me realize how much we'd grown. A vow renewal would be a chance to affirm our commitment, not just to each other, but to the new life we created together. "I think that sounds perfect," I replied, feeling my heart swell with gratitude. It would be an incredible way to mark everything we've been through. We began planning the vow renewal for the following spring, choosing a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It wasn't about the fanfare or the tradition. It was about standing together, openly committing to each other with everything we'd learned. The ceremony would take place at a small, secluded spot by the lake, the same one where we'd first shared our dreams together before the turbulence of the past few years. It felt like the perfect setting to celebrate a future we were both finally ready to embrace. As we prepared for the day, James continued to show me, day by day, just how much he'd changed. He kept up with his therapy sessions, even encouraging me to join in for a few so we could discuss ways to strengthen our relationship. Those sessions helped us both understand how to communicate better, and they deepened our connection in ways I hadn't expected. The morning of the ceremony arrived, bright and warm, with a soft breeze that felt like nature's blessing on the day. I slipped into a simple, elegant dress and made my way to the lake, where James was waiting with a quiet smile. Our closest friends and family were gathered around, watching us with happy, knowing expressions that reflected everything we'd been through. As we stood across from each other, holding hands, James looked at me with a tenderness that took my breath away. When he began his vows, his voice was steady, filled with a quiet conviction. "Lily, I stand here today more in love with you than ever before. You are my partner, my strength, my best friend. I promise to always choose you, to put you first, and to be the husband you deserve. This is our life, and I am grateful every day for the chance to share it with you." Tears filled my eyes as I listened, feeling the weight of his words settle deeply within me. When it was my turn, I took a steadying breath, holding his gaze. "James, we've walked through fire together. You are my partner, my heart, my home. I promise to trust you, to stand by you, and to continue building this life with you. No matter what lies ahead, I will always choose us." The ceremony was simple but profoundly moving, a testament to the resilience we found together. Our friends and family embraced us with heartfelt congratulations, and as the sun set over the lake, James and I shared a quiet moment, watching the water turn golden under the fading light. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a steady, beautiful rhythm, We kept nurturing the peace we created, each of us committed to making our marriage the priority. We found joy in the simplest moments: morning coffee, evening walks, laughter over silly inside jokes. It was a life that felt solid, true, and entirely ours. One evening, as we were preparing dinner together, James looked at me with a soft smile. "You know, Lily, I never could have imagined we'd be here, stronger than ever after everything we went through. You taught me what real love and commitment look like, and I don't think I could ever repay you for that." I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't need to repay me, James. This, what we have now, is more than enough." And as we stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of our home, I realized that we'd finally come to a place of true peace. We'd let go of the past, choosing instead to build a future based on honesty, trust, and love. The wounds were still there, reminders of what we'd overcome, but they no longer defined us. We found our way back to each other, stronger and more united than ever. And as I looked into James's eyes, I knew that this was the life I'd always wanted. One that was built on resilience, love, and the unwavering belief that we could face anything, as long as we faced it together.